Aaron from Wine Country Woodworks, and this is going to be a review video on TCP Global's new 5-gallon resin casting pressure pot. So they sent me out this pressure pot to review. It's technically a prototype. However, just by looking at it, as soon as I unbox it, I could tell that it would be ready to roll. So I have made absolutely no modifications to it. I really don't plan on making any. If I do, all it's going to be is probably just replumbing some of the fittings. The main thing about this that you can probably tell already is that it doesn't have the hole in the lid that's typically for the mixing agitator. And if you've ever watched any of my previous video on setting up TCP pressure pots, I had to account for that. I used the method a long time ago on my 2.5 gallon of essentially taking out that agitator rod and plugging it, and I've since learned that it's a lot easier to just cut that rod and leave it in. However, this you don't have to do anything. So I'm going to not touch anything on the plumbing connections, and I'm just going to fill it up and test how well it holds pressure. If I find that it's leaking at all, then all I'm going to do is probably just put in some sealant, some thread sealant, and test it again, and it should work just fine. The only thing I can tell right off the bat that may need changing is there's one of these kind of, I don't know exactly the technical term for the fitting, but one of the types of fittings where you can you can move it around and not unscrew it. And in my experience, those are not always the best, but that's as simple as just taking it out and just threading it back in the 1/4 inch. So enough of me talking, let's get into testing it and checking it all out for everyone. Figured I'd really quickly show you all a close-up before we do its first test. This is the 5-gallon version, as I mentioned, so it is quite beefy. I already have a 5-gallon version of theirs in the past, and it's quite big. I can fit about a 10 to 11 inch size mold in terms of length, and the height, if I'm remembering correctly, is around 14 inches or so. But let's get into the testing. Okay, kind of funny story. So I went to film a clip of me filling it up for the first time, and it wouldn't fill up, and I was so confused. I started taking off the parts, and I was just like, oh my gosh, the regulator's cranked all the way, and it wouldn't let me fill it up. So I put everything back to exactly the way it came, because I'm pretty positive now that this is going to fill up just fine. Basically out of the box, I didn't change or touch anything to it, and the fact that you can buy a great pressure pot like this, ready for resin casting out the box, as will be tested right now, is pretty cool. So let's fill this up. There we go. It's filling. So this stopped filling up, and I again thought it was because there's a little leak at the inlet, which really shouldn't matter, but I guarantee it's again because the regulator is so cranked. I'm pretty sure. Yep, there we go. So this should be able to go up to 50 to 60, just like their other one with the manual agitator. So I'm gonna keep turning it and set the regulator until it stops at, like, I don't know, 55 or 60, so that I know I can never go past that. Let's see what this will stop at. I know this sound is deceiving from the inlet, but there's actually no leakage sound. You know, there's no massive hissing or anything. As a policy, I almost always like to rethread things just so that I know there's absolutely no leak, but let's get this regulator set. And there goes the safety valve. The thing about the safety valves is you can adjust them too. So I forget which way it turns. It's been a while. But I will probably adjust that too. Or I can just only bring this up to 50 because I think this went off at like 58. I'd have to rewatch the video to see exactly, but it's totally usable right now. So let's fill this back up to 50 because that's a pressure that anybody could use for resin casting, no matter the resin. And we're gonna just see if it'll hold it. Okay, so I tightened down the relief valve a little bit. I filled it up to about like 58, 59, and this started hissing a little bit, ever so slightly. I could put my finger on it and it would stop, but I just let enough air out to get down to like 52 or so, which would be totally fine. I'll probably end up tightening that down in the future a little more so that I can fill this up to 58, 59, no problem. But the most important thing, as I've set up tons and tons of pressure pots, I mean, I think this is the 7th or so. When there's a leak, whether it's a component or whatever, this thing will slowly start going down. I mean, even within a few seconds, you can usually see it go down if there's a noticeable leak. So I can't tell for sure right now if in a couple hours this is going to drop down to 40 or so. I really don't think so. But right now it's about 9 in the morning. I'm going to keep this full for a couple hours, come back at 11. I usually keep my resin in the pot for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours max, but we'll do a 3-hour test. So we'll come back at 11, look at it after 2 hours, and then we'll look at it at 12 for a 3-hour test and see where it's at. And honestly, even if this drops down 2 to 3 degrees in 3 hours, it's not a big deal to me. My general level of PSI is 40 for resin casting, so as long as I'm well above that, I'll be fine. I may end up changing out the plumbing on this guy because I don't like how this thing can twist and turn, especially when I'm trying to be fast and I like everything to be locked down. That's why I've screwed this down and all of that. But anyway, enough blabbing. Let's wait a few hours and see where it's at. But overall, this is so cool that you can just take this out the box, twist the regulator, the relief valve, set it to what you want, and just go. So it's been about 2 hours, and you can tell that it's gone down about, I'm not sure exactly, maybe 3 degrees, 2 at the minimum, 3 at the max, maybe 4. But the point is that I didn't even fill this up, excuse me, all the way to around 60, which I normally would after loosening that valve a little bit more. So honestly, I'm going to spray some soap in a second, and we're gonna, or some soapy water, I should say, and see exactly where the leak is. But at this point, I don't necessarily think it's worth changing anything, and this is ready to go right out the box. So final update, it's been a little over 3 hours, which is plenty long enough. It only dropped down about another degree, so totally fine by my standards. Just thought it was worth mentioning. What's interesting is this plug, which I've of course never touched, and this, which I did touch, are the two things that are leaking. So clearly not enough for me to even mess with anything. I may swap out this bottom thing just to make it a little shorter so it's not as close to this. And when I do, if I do that, I'll put in some thread sealant. But for the most part, really stoked about how this requires really no work if I don't want to do any, and it's just ready to go. Well, everyone, thank you so much for sticking with me and checking out this video. And a huge thank you, of course, to TCP for sending me out this prototype, letting me reviewing it, and sharing it all with you. As soon as I get the link to where this will be listed on Amazon or their website, wherever they end up putting it, I'm sure it'll be on both. I'll make sure to have that link in the video description down below. But this is super exciting. I mean, it was very exciting for me personally, just being contacted by the company, excuse me, that makes pressure pots that I've been using for years now. So that was just really cool on a personal note, but super cool that just resin casting in particular has gotten these companies attention, and a company like TCP is making a pressure pot specifically for people like us. So I just think it's really exciting and really cool in general. So huge shout out to them. Definitely go support them and get one of these if you're interested. So thank you all so much for watching. Definitely comment down below if you have any questions, suggestions, or anything of that matter. Always love to see those and try my best to reply to them, and let me know what you thought. Like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to the next one.